This is Ambition Today. Today we are joined by none other than Michael Loeb. He is the founder and CEO of Loeb NYC. This is Ambition Today.
These are the entrepreneurs, creators, investors, and builders who ambitiously change to the world. Explore the hardships and heroisms of everyday life while we reveal the key moments to leave behind a lasting legacy. This is Ambition Today with Kevin Siskar.
What's up, world? I am Kevin Siskar, and you are listening to Ambition Today. The Ambition list is now live and growing. After every episode, we've been going longer with each guest and asking them one question. What is the single greatest piece of advice you have ever received, and tell us the story of how you learned it? This question has given some amazingly deep and powerful insights from the guests. You can now join at siskar.co/A-list. Make sure you subscribe to the pod everywhere podcasts are found. And in case you missed it, last episode we talked to Brian McCullough. He is the host of the Tech Meme Ride Home podcast, and he's also the author of How the Internet Happened. But today I'm really excited. We have someone who was probably mentioned in that book, Michael Loeb. He's the founder and CEO of Loeb NYC, a private venture investor, startup incubator, and operator of consumer marketing businesses. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kevin.
I'm excited to have you here today. We're here on Fifth Ave in New York City in Midtown. We're at the Loeb offices. Do you want to set the scene for those listening?
Yeah, so we have, we're right across from the Trump building, and that's because I can never be very far from the Donald. No, that's not true at all, actually. We got here, and it just happened to be that he was across the street. That was about 9 years ago. It is a very convenient location to where I live. I'm on 72nd Street, and this is 56. So on a nice day, today is not one of them. You can actually walk here, and it takes about 15 minutes. So
nice.
That commute is a great commute. It is a very dangerous place. Right around here.
Yeah.
Not for you, but for your wallet, right?
Yes.
Because we got Tiffany, and we've got Mary Mecco, and we've got Bergdorf.
$6 coffees. And,
something like, how'd you get that discount coupon? Right? Okay.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited that we're here. We're going to take it back to the beginning like we do with all the guests, try to find the steps along the journey. So tell us a little bit about where and how you grew up. And at what age do you think you were first exposed to entrepreneurship, if you were at all?
Mm-hmm. So I think of myself as a Queens boy.
Okay.
Right. And I grew up, in a 2-bedroom apartment. I shared a bedroom with my sister, and it was a big day that we moved from a 2-bedroom apartment to a 3-bedroom apartment. I had my own bedroom. But we still only had one bathroom. And Whitestone, Queens, it's a little more gentrified than it was, but it was very, shall we say, mixed. And but I am the product of a journalist, and my dad is Jewish and grew up in Chicago. My mom is Catholic and grew up in Germany. A lot of people say they're German, but that means they were born in Wisconsin, right? And on a farm. But no, they were married in Berlin. My dad, as a journalist, was stationed over in Berlin and married a perky young Pan Am stewardess, is what the appropriate term of the day was. And if you couldn't become a movie star, you became a stewardess. And they actually, after they got married, went on what amounted to a 1-year honeymoon. And the deal was, as long as my dad mentioned Pan Am in the article that he filed with 400 syndicated papers around the United States, they would fly for free. So they did that
Amazing.
for an entire year, and he brought his little brownie camera, and he took a picture of little tiny Peggy. That was my mom's, her real name was Ermengarde, but she went by Peggy, because who can pronounce Ermengarde, right? And little tiny Peggy in front of the giant pyramids. And I said, Dad, this is so hokey. And he said, back then, not everybody knew about the pyramids. So that was a big deal. So
wow.
That's what they did. I was almost born in Tokyo, but they made it as far as St. Louis, Missouri. And I kind of came out then. And it wasn't my fault, but I was born in St. Louis. But as quickly as I could persuade my parents, when I was 1 year old, we moved to New York, where my dad got a job at Time Inc. and where he was a journalist there for about 40 years. His last job was managing editor of Fortune magazine, which he did for about 10 years. So writer of books, gave a lot of speeches, was on radio for about 40 years, CBS Radio. I am told that I have a face for radio. That's a
you have a voice for radio.
Well, a face for radio.
Yeah.
That's a Groucho Marx line, that I have a face for radio. But anyway, maybe I inherit that part from my dad. But he was credited with almost inventing the category of personal finance. So he was also the managing editor of Money magazine. So that was my upbringing.
Well, that sounds like an incredible upbringing.
Yeah.
Were there any lessons in there where you feel, I mean, obviously there was entrepreneurship in there, Fortune and Money, but where you feel like they applied to you? So did you start your first business, or you watched your uncle or your dad do something that it clicked for you, or you didn't maybe realize it until you were older?
Right. No, it was, I was always that kid. I was always the lemonade stand kid, the paper route kid, the do all the loans in the neighborhood kid. I was kind of that kid. And I think my dad kind of fostered that because, we would hear, Money magazine, right? What was that about, right? That was about how do you make more money? And Fortune magazine, this was the captain of industries and how they did it. And those stories, came home. I was probably 8.
Just like this podcast.
Just like this podcast. I was probably 8 where I knew what a sans serif font was. I was the only kid in Queens who knew what a sans serif font was. But, the whole idea of journalism and print and discovery and knowledge and free exchange of information and curiosity was something that I grew up with and, frankly, has always served me pretty well. And I was always curious about, how things started. And I think the whole startup thing is so cool. It's like making a baby. You want to have a baby, you make one. And if you want a business, you just make a business. How cool is that? So.
Well, I think that's what I think we try to isolate here is a lot of people have that seed of this like intellectual curiosity, but how the hell did they get it, right? And so it sounds like your father and your parents did a good job in instilling that. So you then go on, you start your corporate life working at Time.
Correct.
How were you as an employee, right? So we just talked about how entrepreneurial you were as a kid.
Right.
We know where you end up. So how were you as an employee?
I was dreadful, actually.
Yeah?
No, but but I was dreadful only in one way, which is Time Inc. at the time, and I can talk about it now because there is no more Time Inc. Boo-hoo, right?
Sad.
It's bought by, it really is sad. And by the way, such an illustration of the times, right? It was only about 10 years ago that I had $1.3 billion in free cash flow to like zero and bought by Meredith, the detritus bought by Meredith. But my problem was I didn't care, right? And what I didn't care about was I just wanted to win, okay? And Time Inc. was known as a collegial place. And by the way, it was not atypical for the sons and daughters of Time Inc., the good sons and daughters of Time Inc., to join Time Inc. And my dad was, again, it was 8,000 people. He was on the journalism side and I was on the business side. If I had more talent, maybe I'd be on the journalism side. But I was assigned, for example, to Sports Illustrated. Okay. And the presumption of Sports Illustrated, mature property, maybe it can grow 3, 4, 5% a year. And not for me, I wanted 30% a year.
Why not?
And why not? But that was, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. And we broke a whole lot of rules at Sports Illustrated, did some really cool stuff. I bet you didn't know this. You're looking at the inventor and the patent holder of the sneaker phone and the football phone.
Wow.
Yeah. That I invented as premiums for Sports Illustrated. Also the bloopers videos.
That was like something you would get when you subscribed to the magazine.
That's what a premium is called.
Got it.
Okay. But yes, and so that was, the notion of kind of flipping the selling proposition so that the accent is on the free gift and not on the product was not a very popular thing. And that was only one of a number of not so terribly popular things. But again, I didn't care. I just wanted to get that 30% growth. And when I was assigned to Sports Illustrated, the profits were about $40 million a year. In about 3 years, I had it at $100 million a year. And that was through a bunch of really, I think, kind of cool marketing techniques. The evolution and revolution of the swimsuit issue also had something to do with that, which for a long time in Sports Illustrated was just a few pages on the inside of a February magazine, as opposed to separate videos, separate calendars, and its own issue.
February magazine.
Right, entire February magazine. So, and from there, and you asked how I became an entrepreneur, and the answer is artificially, because I arced from there to launching Entertainment Weekly. I got the reputation of Launch Boy at Time Inc., which I say in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So
there's worse nicknames to have. That's not a bad one.
Launch Boy, yeah. Right? I wanted to be Launch Man, right? If I had a few, maybe I'd be a Launch Man. But I was younger then, so Launch Boy. But launched Sports Illustrated for Kids, and the video division and a lot of things. And so they said, Michael, take a look at this concept floating around the building without a sponsor. Entertainment Weekly, which for me was the big three sports, were the big three forms of entertainment. And I was paired up with an editor who wanted to rewrite The Atlantic, right? Which is fine, but if you talk about poetry, the last name is Weekly, and you're not going to get over the fixed variable divide, which in a weekly magazine is about 1 million in circulation, if you're talking about poetry, right? So. Right. That was the formula for a disaster, which in the very beginning it was not so great. And we are both relieved of our jobs, right? So I was shown the door. And so were it not for that, so I was probably an intrapreneur and didn't understand that I was an intrapreneur.
Exactly, yeah.
And I was shown the door, and I didn't mean to get revenge, but I started the company outside of Time Inc. that I was trying to start inside of Time Inc.
Do you think that I've been fired?
Yeah.
Do you think that getting fired was
congratulations
was some sort of
right.
Well, at the time I was very shocked, right?
Right.
But in hindsight, I'm almost grateful.
You're fired. No, I see the shock registering on your face right now.
But I think it wakes people up essentially,
right.
At a certain extent. So did you feel that it kind of shook you, and you're like, oh, there's more to this world than just this job?
Well, you know what? For me, it wasn't a surprise, okay. Right? Because I knew that I knew that if the magazine didn't hit a certain amount of circulation by year end, they would close it. So that was my goal.
Yeah.
And I had to break more than a few eggs to make that omelet. And I knew that it would catch up with me. And it finally did. So it wasn't a total surprise because I was committed to the product. I wanted to win, right? I wanted that to work. And so I was not entirely surprised. I did not know exactly what I wanted to do, but it made sense for me. And I really was working on this concept that a magazine should be sold as a service, not a product.
Okay.
Now, back in the day, when you bought a magazine, you bought a year-long subscription, and an issue at a time would be dribbled out, and then you'd be peppered by renewal notices and bills. And I said, that's silly. We're working really hard to get a subscriber, and we finally get them, and then we got a prescribed death date, right? On day 366, that relationship is torn asunder, right? And you can only revive it by responding to a renewal notice, and you would check the box, say, bill me later. And then after the wash cycle, you had the rinse cycle, so there was 2 ways to fail. And instead, it should be replaced by a different architecture, which is you should sign up, give me your credit card, and it should go on ad infinitum until you say stop. So inertia went from your mortal enemy to your best friend, right? Now, people on the outside looking in said, oh, so smart, you'll save on renewal notices and bills. But what you really did was triple lifetime value. Inertia is that powerful a force, right? And if you triple lifetime value, and we had some enormous competitors in the space, but we won the war the same way Grant won the war, right? Because Grant had 2.5 times the North, had 2.5 times the troops of the South. So as long as Grant was not 2.5 times as dumb, right? He could be 2.49999 times as dumb. At the end, he'd have won. The other guy had 0, and he'd win.
It's pretty impressive because you think about it. I mean, everyone, Birchbox, all these subscription, direct-to-consumer businesses today basically live on this principle, and it's really interesting to hear that really nobody was doing it, and it was kind of
and it was funny, Kevin, because way back when, the concept of a subscription or a membership, that for a time was a dirty word. And then all of a sudden it got back in vogue.
Yeah.
And we actually see that all the time. I mean, what is old is new again. But those of us, those gray hairs of us, kind of look at what's going on right now. For example, Google
There's a techlash right now.
Yeah, well, techlash. But essentially what is available on Google is what we've been doing in direct mail, right? Except that it's on super duper steroids, right? So instead of measuring things in weeks and months, it's in nanoseconds. But the principles all apply, like what is your acquisition cost? What is your lifetime value? What are the customer segments? What is your messaging? I mean, these are very similar principles. It's just, instead of driving at 1 mile an hour, it's 1 billion miles an hour. But it's you can repurpose the same kind of mechanic and be successful.
I want to move on to Synapse Group in a minute, but while we're on that, one of the consequences I've seen of that is I'm born and raised kid from Buffalo, right? Suburbs,
My
rural area.
condolences.
Yeah, thank you. Go Bills also, though. But a lot of small businesses don't want to even mess with anything tech related. How do you see that trend going? They're going to my opinion is they're going to have to adapt.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, adapt or die. I mean, I'm pretty sure that there was a whole bunch of people who said, that horse, it's so much better in a car, right?
Yeah.
Let's just keep that for a while. So this is not new, right? I mean, basically, there have been waves of innovation, and it's been adopt or die for a long time. And I think what we are seeing is something rather dramatic right now. And what has changed, and what I look at, is the Mad Men era, right? 1960. If you go back 30 years and you go forward 30 years from 1960, not much happened, right? And then all of a sudden, oh my God, like totally transformed. And what has changed, and this is a very important change, is that the C-suite used to have a preservation mentality. So any executive in the Fortune 500 would say, no, nothing new. Let's stay the same because that's the right path. But now I think they're persuaded that if they're doing things today like they were yesterday, they're doing it wrong. So that mindset has changed and that adaptability has changed. But there's a whole lot of people who still don't know the difference between a Telegram and Instagram. Right?
Yeah.
And they run some of the biggest companies in America.
For sure. Well, let's keep it moving here. So we were talking about
Was I being slow? Was that the problem? No? Okay, fine.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we get through everything. So you were leaving Time, and then
No, leaving is nice.
you got fired from
got
Time.
kicked out. Right.
You have this idea, and what happens next? Is that Synapse?
Yeah, that is Synapse.
What is that?
But Synapse was this concept that instead of, again, sending out renewal notices and bills, you get a credit card up front and you just automatically bill the magazine on the credit card on a annualized basis.
So what happens to Synapse?
Synapse becomes
Does it grow?
Yeah, important middle piece in there, which was meeting Jay Walker, but I'll come back to that. It does grow. It grows into an enormous company, largest in its space, and was bringing it public in 2000. Most people say, what happened next, but we were the ugly duckling that was turning into a swan because everybody else who was going public before March of 2000 was an internet company, and the bankers kept on saying, Michael, you're an internet company, right? Like episode 3 of Star Wars, right? You don't want these drones. We weren't an internet company. Now we had a big internet piece. We were one of the very first things Amazon sold besides books was our magazines or through us. But we work with AOL. But, for the most part, we're paper and ink.
Yeah.
And but after March of 2000, thank God you're not an internet company. So we were going to go public because growing really quickly, forecastable revenues, very, very profitable. And then, wouldn't you know, Time Inc. gave me a call and said, wouldn't you like to bury the hatchet? And I said, a very good idea. Where? But no, that's not true. We were their biggest source of subscriptions and readers, and they were our biggest clients. So it made a good deal of sense. And they said, we'd like to buy you. And I said, not your stinky stock, because they were just merging with AOL. And they said, no, all cash deal. And I said, terrific. Turned out to be an $800 million deal, which was pretty good, good day. The rub was I had a 5-year earn-out, so they made me work for it. And
as they usually do.
As they usually do. And after 5 years, I started Loeb Enterprises, which is, I think, a different take on startups. But let me go backwards a little bit to say that very early in the curve, I met this guy, Jay Walker.
Okay, who is Jay Walker?
Jay is associated with, rightfully, for the founder of Priceline.com. And we worked together intensively for about a 5-year period of time. And in the very beginning, we worked intensively just on Synapse. And Jay, as kind of one of these relentless intellects, came up with many, many ideas. And one of them turned out to be Priceline.com, which was incubated inside of Synapse for about the first 2 years of its life. So we took the money that we would normally take home and put it into Priceline.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be about $12.5 million each, which was where it got its start. And even in the second shot of capital for Priceline, that was done when this was back in around 95. There was no internet. We didn't even call it that. We called it www something or other.
The information superhighway.
Kind of like that. And in those days, there really wasn't, a capital well that you can draw upon, because nobody knew what the heck this was. So we wound up selling a piece of Synapse to finance Priceline. That was largely Jay's capital. And that was what bridged us into the IPO, which was brought to you by our friends at Goldman Sachs in 1999. So, and the rest is history. It's now a $100 billion plus, company.
Yeah, that's amazing. So 2 hits under the belt at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You leave Synapse after the earn-out, and then you start Loeb NYC?
Yes.
Cool. So what happens next?
Well, what happens next, my partner in the business is a guy that I've worked with for over 30 years. Rich Vogel followed me from Time Inc. into Synapse and Priceline, and then Loeb Enterprises. He is the yin to my yang. I'm the bright, shiny object guy, and he's the guy saying, not so fast. It may be illegal. I say, really? How could it be illegal? Can't we change the laws? Very good. He keeps me anchored. A very good relationship.
You complement each other well.
Yeah, we do. And what we wanted to do was something a little bit different. I don't want to use the word broken. I just want to talk about point of views. But if you look at how startups happen right now, everything is very compartmentalized. You got the idea, and that's in one bucket. You've got the management team, and that's in another one. Then you got a capital in another one, and there's stages, right? So a couple of guys or girls in a garage will come up with something, research it, get a little traction, and maybe if they're lucky, they get some angel money, and then if they're lucky, they get into an incubator. Incubator, you're in and out in 90 days. And then if you're lucky, there's an A round, and then all along the way, you got to get more talent and know-how. And each of these stages and pieces are points of failure, right? And it all adds up to a fail rate of what VCs admit to being 80%.
If not 90%,
right.
Yeah.
If you get them drunk, they'll tell you 90%.
Yeah.
So think about that. 90% fail, right? 90% fail. And what if we attack the reasons for the failure, right? And we put those reasons into 3 large buckets. Bucket number 1 is bad capital. Now, is any capital bad? And the answer is, well, sometimes, weird prefs, KPIs, a co-pilot that is always giving you chafe. But what I'm really referring to is that a business cycle on average is about 8 years in length, and that gets followed by a recession, which is 2 or 3 years in length. And during a recession, you can get zero money, none, zero. So you're a company and you're growing and you got capital needs. And what happens if you're 5 years on, boom, a recession? You can't get any money at all, zero. And that is the worst reason to crap out, is that you're successful and you're doing everything you should be doing and you run out of rocket fuel, right? No more oxygen, you're dead. So that's bad capital. Then there's bad ideas, right? And we've kind of assigned 30% to each one of these three buckets, adding up to 90. Bad ideas. And you would say, well, VCs, they've got good judgment, and indeed they do. They're really smart people, although I will tell you.
They spray and pray a lot too.
They do, and there's nothing replacing being an operator. There's something about looking at it from 35,000 feet, but also from 3 feet, or 3 inches off the ground.
And this is a point of contention in VC world because there's the analysts who say you don't need to be an operator. The operator,
oh my God.
So I'm of the operator camp because I've seen you can lean over someone's desk and be like, hey, I can help you with this.
Well, you know what it is? It's the blink response, right? And if you've done it long enough, you look at it and you say, this is not going to work, right? Or this is going to work. And they'll say, how do you know? And it's like, I don't know how I know. I just know it's going to work, right?
But it's an eye-opening holy shit moment where you're like, this is going to be amazing.
I thought you're not allowed to swear. You told me that. What's good for the goose is not good for the gander. What's going on here, Kevin?
We'll see.
Bilateral, please, dude.
We'll mark it as explicit.
Fairness.
We'll figure it out.
Come on. Okay, fine. All right. So, second is...
You're getting me excited with the
I am?
Yeah.
That's you being excited?
Well, we're getting
there.
We're getting there.
Sit exactly where you are. Don't get any closer. All right. So...
idea stage.
Second bucket. Yeah. Right, bad idea. All right. Now, the interesting thing about funds, right, is that funds, VCs, venture, and it's an asset class, right? And a money manager will tell you that asset allocation is, again, the most important thing. 80% of returns from asset allocation. So the interesting thing about venture, it is on one side of the asset allocation spectrum, right? It is in the highly risky, highly inflexible, highly illiquid, and it's either high returning or no returning, right? But when you commit capital to a fund, you don't commit $1 million right away. What you do is you say to them, I will send you a check when you find a deal, which means that you got to park the money into something highly liquid and highly sure, and by definition, low returning. It is the opposite side of, right?
Yeah, it just sits there waiting for a capital call.
That's right. So it's the opposite side of the asset class spectrum. So what you find is that venture guys are in such a rush to find a deal that they wind up putting money into things that they know that dog is probably not going to hunt. And the way they think about things is, you know what, I got a couple of winners in the fund anyway, that's going to carry the day. So if I got a couple of losers, fine. But I got my clients, right, who I told them I had all the deal flow in the world, and they're calling me up every day saying, when are you going to put that money to work? And when are you going to find those deals? And I finally had to tell them, I found one, send your money over, right? So there's a real urgency to doing that. And so institutionally, the way it's structured is you often find that VCs will put money into bad deals, right? Yeah. So bad capital, bad deals. And the last is bad execution, which is really kind of no execution. And the fact of the matter is, if you're a young startup, you've got to find incredibly skilled people in incredibly different fields, and that's really hard to do. You got to find tech people and marketing people and back office people and legal people and patenting people and design people and UI UX people and all these people. And the problem is you got a failure rate that's 8 or 9 out of 10, right? And how do you persuade somebody when it's that rate of failure to join your company? And how do you find all these people, super high quality people, fast? And the problem is it's a real challenge and you probably can't do it. What we have here at Loeb NYC is, to complement the 20 companies that we're building, is a shared services layer, which I think of as all the tools that a startup needs to start up, right? So if you need a saw, I got a saw. You need a hammer, I got a hammer. And what do those sound like? That sounds like tech, back office accounting, in-house agency for collateral, UI, UX. And it sounds like every form of marketing.
It's like the Swiss Army knife of everything a founder needs.
Everything a founder needs. And all the marketing channels from new school, so that's all the digital SEM, SEO, programmatic, social, yada, yada, to things like old school things like direct mail, which, as you pointed out, is being rediscovered, to field force. We got one of those to telemarketing, to TV, radio, you name it. And that is because we have found that a multi-channel attack is the most successful. Different strokes for different folks. Some people want to buy on TV and some people only on the internet, and some people like direct mail, and sometimes you lead generate with one channel and close on the phone. So we've got that Swiss Army knife too. All those services are free to those companies, and the reason why they're free is, one, we have a very large stake in them. About half the companies are genuinely ours front to back, and the other half, and the others range from, there's a spectrum, just the thread of an idea that comes in, and we said this is pretty cool, to a company that's very, very early in the curve, $1 million in sales, couple million in sales, and we bring them in, and we don't think of it as incubation, we think of it as curation. And we will, instead of 90 days, we'll be at something for 9 years, and we'll just grow it and grow and grow it.
So I do love the model, and it's really interesting. I think it's innovating in an industry that traditionally does not innovate. I talk to most venture capitalists and I ask them what their tech stack is, and it's an Excel spreadsheet with a Gmail client. Like there is no thought beyond what you said earlier of, I just need to fill these deals, I have a bank account.
Right.
They don't build a business around their funds, and I think that's a huge missed opportunity. And the people that do that in the next few years are going to win in venture capital.
So Kevin, here's another dirty little secret about the industry. So
Shoot.
A venture firm will raise a fund every 2 or 3 years, right? Front to back, the truth doesn't come out, right, on the fund for 7 to 10 years, right? Because you put all those money to work and it takes a long time, right? That money has got to marinate. That money has got to be in those companies, and they're going to get other funding and blah, blah, blah. And the disposition of those companies, of those investments, are not going to be known for as long as a decade. If you look at front to back, that's how long those funds last. Yeah. Okay, so they're raising money every 2 to 3 years, and the truth doesn't come out for 10 years, right? So then it becomes, how do you value the performance? You got this thing called mark to market. How do I determine mark to market? Well, mark to market is based on value of the last raise, right? Value of the last raise, or a comp. Well, you can drive a truck through both those things, right? So somebody was really dumb and had an exaggerated value in your company, and it was just a tiny little round. You see this all the time, that these companies put in, I'll put in $1 million in yours if you put in $1 million of mine at these exaggerated valuations, because I want to say on a mark-to-market basis that we're up 53%.
Yeah. They want to sell the markup back to their limited partners.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And because they're on to the next raise.
Right.
So it's kind of, and they don't really own the outcome per se, because, they got the 2 and 20, and they can live very nicely just on the 2. Yeah. So, for us, it's very real. We put to work, every year somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 million. It's our money.
Wow.
It becomes pretty serious pretty quickly. And we have a community, the people who work here. It's very interesting. It's hard to be an entrepreneur in your 30s, right? If you didn't have a big win in your 20s. And the reason for that is that the fail rate, if it's really 80 or 90%, and you got kids, and you got a mortgage, and you got a house, and if you don't have a lot of bank, right? Maybe you had a victory, maybe you made $5 million. That sounds like forever, but if you're putting a lot of money into your next thing and you got to make the car payment at the same time, you may not be able to do that.
Right.
But the people here can, right?
Yeah.
So they're on the high wire, but they got a net, right? And I call our people pirates, which is we pay for room and board, but you make money on the plundering. Right? And the plundering is when there's an event. Now, I talked about shared service. The shared services people have pieces of equity in like all the companies. And of course, the CEOs of the companies have equity in their own, and sometimes in adjacent companies as well. The community here likes everybody else to win because they know it's the victories.
It's a win-win for everybody, yeah.
It's a win-win for everybody. And I think it's different than an incubator, because incubators sort you by type. You're fintech, restaurant tech, what the heck tech.
Yeah.
And you are at least a little bit competitive with everybody else. And you're competitive in a lot of different ways, including the competition for talent, the competition for capital when you exit. But here, there is no competition. Everybody wants to be part of this community. Everybody wants to make it work. And they know that if the more things that work, the bigger we can get and the more things that we can do. The other things are that we will take our entrepreneurs, our CEOs, and we'll put them on project after project. So a project will have an outcome. It's either a good outcome or a not so good outcome, but there will be a disposition, an outcome. And as long as it was a quality at bat, right, we'll sign them up for the next thing. And the interesting thing is, in the world of VCdom, when you hand a 26-year-old $5 million, you've never seen one penny come back, right? That 26-year-old can say, wait a minute, this dog is not hunting, but to hand the money back saying the dog's not hunting, okay, you preserve your capital, right? Use it on something else because I'm just going to burn it up, right? This is like not working. That'll never happen because then what you're doing is you're admitting failure, right? I mean, you would never do that. You are going to spend that money no matter what.
But someone you already have a relationship with who's had a few at-bats.
We never assign capital that way. We just pay bills. So every month is another look at the business and
So you give people freedom, really. You
freedom.
Manufacture freedom for people, which is lets them.
And by the way, we treat them like adults, right? We kind of say, look, we're in it together, right? So the shared services that I described, they do not bill out to the companies. There's no billing out. Everybody works together. Why don't you bill stuff out? Well, one, we own a very big stake in all this stuff, either all or a very big stake. But it's not a good use of time. I don't want to have some CEO running down to some guy in the art department saying, Joe, what? It took you 6 hours to make my logo? How could it take 6 hours? Well, you know what? Sometimes a lot of companies pay $100,000 to get a right? I mean, it took you not a productive discussion. It was like, that's how much you either trust me that I'm thinking about it the right way and working as hard as I can, or you don't. But for me to put something on a timesheet and for you to pay for that and for us to have a debate about this stuff is just not productive. So we're not going to do it. So it's meant to be big and collaborative and one big happy family. Does it always work? Of course not. But I think we minimize the water cooler, talk. And I think that for the most part, people really try to do the best for one another, and they're rooting for everybody's success.
Well, I love the model. I've been hanging out a little bit with Brian Janesco and Grow, and from what I've seen, everybody here is incredibly nice, excellent. It's been really good to experience as well, not just hear about. So, on that note, we're going to take a quick break. We're here with Michael Loeb talking about Loeb NYC, and we'll be right back with more.
This is Ambition Today.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Ambition Today. Remember to join the A-List back channel to get the single greatest piece of advice our CEO guests have ever received. The price is super founder friendly, starting only $3. Visit syscar.co/A-List to join the show's back channel today. And Ambition Today is happy to partner with Audible. Visit audibletrial.com/ambition today to download and keep any audiobook for free. I'm currently reading 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Harari. It's great. Definitely check it out. If you want to grab a copy, audibletrial.com/ambition today to download and listen for free. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to leave us a review in the store, wherever you listen. And we are back to this amazing episode of Ambition Today.
Visit Ambition Today online at syscar.co and follow the show on social media at Ambition Today.
Welcome back. We are here with Michael Loeb, and we were talking about Loeb NYC before the break. So I wanted to ask you a few things about Loeb. So you're based in New York City. You're playing in venture capital, which is notoriously a Silicon Valley endeavor. I'm going to lead the witness here because I also operate and work in New York City. But I want to hear your theories on New York, what you think of the city, and what are the pros and cons of being in startups and venture capital here in New York?
Mm-hmm. So, I find that one of the great things about New York is how compressed it is. And within a 3-minute walk of this building is $1 trillion in capital and a whole lot of brains. And, the other thing is it's now such a great magnet for young people, young and talented people. It used to be, in days of yore, what you would do is you'd graduate college, spend 2 or 3 years in New York, get married, and then you'd move to the suburbs.
You do your time.
You did your time.
Yeah.
But it was dirty and it was dangerous. And the city was tamed by a series of, very good administrators. And I'm referring to Giuliani before he went crazy, and Bloomberg, who's seriously not crazy. I'd love to have the guy president, and replaced by the blah, blah, Blasio, who I'm not so much a fan of. But in any event, the city is much more civil. I've actually raised a bunch of kids here, and it's a great place to raise kids. And, wonderful restaurants, wonderful community, and it's becoming more and more vibrant and interesting, as illustrated by, Amazon's moving in. Google spent $2.4 billion, buying some real estate here. You've got
they're buying
Cornell,
more, too, yeah.
Buying more. You got Cornell Tech moving in. So it's fast becoming a tech hub. They say that Queens, new home of Amazon 2, A2, or HQ2, is most diverse place on the planet. That like 100 languages are spoken there. And
oh, wow.
But and if you've seen the development going on in that borough, it's really kind of amazing. So I think the urban experience and the city, the super concentration of talent and people and culture is very attractive to young people and very interesting young people. So we find we have some wonderful talent here. We're committed to New York, but we're not New York exclusive. I've got a number of companies outside of New York. Those decisions are generally related to where does the talent want to reside. But there's, some great advantage in New York. The disadvantage is the prices here are not low.
True.
And prices for people are not low. But having said that, I find it very interesting, and I find that it's a great place to build companies.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually at an event earlier today. It was an international event, and another country brought their startups in to do a demo day in New York. And I said, oh, where are some of the companies? And he goes, well, they're the ones, talking to people. All the New Yorkers are looking at their laptops working nonstop.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of hustle in New Yorkers, obviously. So, well, that's great. I want to pivot here to media a little bit. You've spent your whole life watching the media space. And it seems that, the problem in the future is going to be sorting through the right information and an abundance of it versus in the past when it was just to get the information, get the magazines delivered. So how do you see the media space evolving? BuzzFeed has layoffs this week. People are saying it's the end of times, but I don't think it is, obviously. I mean, so how do you see the space evolving?
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see what is going on. And I'll give you kind of a story. Personal story, which is my dad was at my house in Southampton. This might have been 7-8 years ago. And Art Buchwald had passed away. And I got that on my news feed. And I went to my dad and I said, Dad, your friend Art Buchwald passed away. And he right away said, I want to file a story, right? Because that's what he did. That's what a journalist did. He filed stories. And so I said, well, before you do that, let me do a little research and I'll print some out for you, which is how we continue to read things, right? It wouldn't be on a screen. He had to get it printed out. So I printed out about 15 or 20 articles. This is minutes after Buchwald died. And again, my dad was intent on filing a story, and his answer was, I've known him for 50 years. I know things about him that nobody else knows. Colorful things, wonderful things. And then when I hand him the pile of articles, he spent about 20 minutes, and then he threw up his hands and said, there's nothing more to write about. So it's an illustration of what used to be, and what used to be is it was not news unless it was in the pages of Time magazine or the Wall Street Journal or the LA Times or the New York Times. And they had essentially a monopoly on the news. It was not qualified for real news. And now with the democratization of all this, anything's news, right? And the problem is not just the fake news, but the problem is all the news has to be so shrill, right? So we're dumbbelled, and this has been articulated in politics and everything else. I mean, where has statesmanship gone? And by the way, I was appalled, like most Americans, when we saw the presidential quote unquote debates.
Yeah, brutal.
And, people prancing around saying, I'm going to put you in jail. I mean, what the heck is that all about? And so anyway, after the first one, which passed for debate, I went and I took a look at a Reagan Mondale debate from, 3.5 decades earlier. And what was amazing is, we had two men. They stood at the dais. They didn't move from the dais. No one talked over one another. No one interrupted. Everybody, when they had a minute, they stuck to a minute, right? When they were interrupted by the moderator for Fenn, they went over, they stopped right away. And every response started with, in contrast to my esteemed opponent, I believe X, Y, and Z. It was so civil, right? And whatever happened to that? And now I think it's all connected. I think that there's so much news and so much noise that it's only the screams and the yelps that get noticed at all.
Correct.
And so we got to be so crazy on the left and so crazy on the right. And it's gotten so impassioned and ridiculous. I mean, the latest is Elizabeth Warren. You probably read about this. Now, $50 million is a lot of money, but she wants to tax, right, your net worth. She wants 2% a year for every dollar above a $50 million net worth.
Yeah. Someone pointed out that if in New York City she would increase that like 8%, it comes to 100.
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
But imagine that. I mean, and by the way, that's all your assets. That's your house. That's your business.
Yeah.
Somebody values your business. Somebody says, oh my God, you're paying 50 million. I admit is a lot. But the notion that every year, for every dollar above that, you open your wallet way wide every single year and you give it to the government.
So on the media note, I want to, word on the historical street is we had a similar problem when newspapers came out with fake news. And then what happened over the next 50 years is brands established credibility and legitimacy and had to be in Time and Fortune and to be news. And so I'm hoping that we see the pendulum start to swing back to trusted brands, and that's sort of what cures this. But I don't know.
That would be a great hope.
Yeah.
That would be a great hope. I mean, what is different is there's so much of it. And then there is the influencer phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
And, where 20 million people watch somebody else put on makeup, which is really kind of an amazing thing to me. But anyhow.
If you spend time with younger people, I have three younger brothers.
And they put on makeup?
No, they don't put on makeup.
Okay.
But you'd be amazed at the TikTok. You know about TikTok?
I do. Chinese company.
Yeah,
right.
But have you spent time getting sucked into it?
I have not.
Brutal.
Yeah.
You'll spend hours in it. All right. Well, let's keep moving. So I heard you say in an interview with Bonham Burr that you wish you had bet on yourself earlier in life.
Yep.
So I want to ask, how old were you when you quit, were fired from Time Inc., and what advice would you have to other people to bet on themselves earlier in their lives?
So thank you for bringing that up. I was fired when I was 36 years old. It took me about a year to get organized vis-a-vis Synapse. So I'm not alone. Bloomberg was fired when he was like 38, so I'm using that as
But I think this is important because there's articles in the New York Times, about millennial burnout and all this and that, and there's people that are 21 years old and having panic attacks because they haven't made something of themselves. So I think to say that you didn't even start until in your entrepreneurial journey until 36 or 7, that's actually empowering to a lot of people. So I think that's
and yes, you can start later. But it's interesting about entrepreneurs. I think that entrepreneurs know that they're entrepreneurs. I think that they know they're entrepreneurs because they are the lemonade stand guys. They are the guys who are always thinking. I mean, one way to tell is when you walk in a room, right, and you see something and you say, I can improve that. And it's just automatic, right?
Yeah.
I can improve that. And an entrepreneur will look at the state of play and say, you know what, it's suboptimal. Here's how you make it better. And it just happens automatically. And so you need that, and you need a lot of other things. You need courage, you need opportunity. And but I do think I do personally wish I started earlier, because I think I had, that gene, that je ne sais quoi. I don't know what that was, but I was that kid. Not everybody has that. And by the way, if everybody did, it'd be chaos. So thank God, right? Because what I say about entrepreneurs is that like a red light is optional, right? It's like somebody else's idea.
Right,
I didn't invent that red light. I'm going through it. No other cars, I'm there, right? So no, it'd be chaos. And, when you build a company, you can't have, 1,000 cats that you got to herd. You got to have one quarterback, and then everybody else has assignments, and they got to follow assignments. And if they don't, it's going to be chaos. So you always need a mix. But I do wish for me that I did start earlier. And thank goodness I was fired, because if I wasn't, I probably
you may
would
have never started.
I would have gone into forced retirement right now, because Meredith would have said, Michael, we don't have any room for you anymore. So anyway, you're right.
That's an amazing scenario to think about. What if you were never fired?
Right. That could have been it. I could have never been fired. Thank God I was just bad enough to get fired.
Yeah.
Right. But anyhow.
So that's excellent. So I want to flip to the other side, less about early life, more about later in life. I want to know how you think about legacy.
Well, there is a line, and I attribute it to Keats, but I know I'm wrong about that. And I can't remember who the poet was, but on his tombstone, right, which is made out of granite, he says, our names are writ on water. Our names are written in water. And of course, the irony is, here it is in granite, our names are written in water. And what that kind of says, Kevin, is that life is so ephemeral, right? I mean, as you drag your finger through the water, it goes away right away. What I want as my legacy is I want to have some things that endure. I want to build some companies that people can say, Michael Loeb built that. And the other thing I'd like is I had a lunch with one of my mentors, a guy named Nick Nicholas. Nick was the co-CEO of Time Warner at one time. And at lunch, he said, Michael, even the greats had only one good idea. And I said, Bill Gates. And he said, one good idea. Ted Turner, one good idea. Then Steve Jobs, he said, got me there. So you look at the Steve Jobses, and the Elon Musk, and, again, the book on him has not been completely written, but you got to give him credit for this audacious idea.
Sure.
This automobile, it's nuts. But to be able to do it multiple times in multiple fields of play and have that make a difference, and to be enduring, and to enrich people, both inside the company and outside the company. So it's something that does good, that, is a great new product, a great new convenience, a great new whatever, but also the stakeholders in the company, that they have been able to buy college educations and pay down mortgages and all that stuff. That is a wonderful legacy. And to be able to be an agent of that change is something that I aspire to, not once or twice, but multiple times.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Well, thank you. This has been an amazing episode. As always, for those of you listening, the show notes, which include everything we talked about, will be up on the website. Share this episode with a friend. Leave us a review. We truly appreciate it. Michael, we are going to take it over to the back channel to hear the greatest piece of advice you've ever received. But thank you for coming on the podcast today. Where can people go find out more about you, or is there anything else you want people to check out?
You can go on our website. So Loeb Enterprises or Loeb NYC or one of those things, and find out more about us.
All right, awesome. Well, let's take this over to the A-List back channel for those members, and everyone else, stay curious. I will see you on the next episode of Ambition Today.
Thanks for listening to Ambition Today. Be sure to visit Syscar.co to get all the information from this episode and more great content. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.